Alright, sorry the video was cut short. This is part 2. Uh, I just thought that coming from Google Docs, it would be better to teach here so that I can annotate. Uh, so yeah. Now, let's continue coming from where we paused. We are currently with seminal vesicles. So yeah, the purpose of the fluid that's secreted by the seminal vesicle is to neutralize the acid in the female reproductive tract. It is known that the female reproductive tract is acidic in nature, and the sperm, um, provided that it enters the female reproductive tract, uh, it is the fluid from the sperm is able to protect the sperm from being killed by the acidic environment of the female reproductive tract. That's the purpose of this alkaline fluid. And what I mean by prostaglandins, uh, these are the ones that provide motility. Um, Motility, basically how agile the sperm cell is very important because they swim. Through using their flagella, they have to travel all the way to the this part. Say this is the uterus, this is the vagina, these are the ovaries. Well, they have to travel until here, where the egg cells ought to be located at. And that's where fertilization is supposed to happen, given that sperm cells arrive at this point. I think this is called the something, I'm not sure, I forgot the name already, but there you go. It's called the uterine tube. There are two other names aside from the uterine tube. Fallopian tubes, yes. And there's another one. We'll get to that later. But as of the moment, let's continue. So we know what prostaglandins do. Let's move on to the prostate gland. So the prostate gland secretes two things. One is citrate, the other is enzymes. For citrate, this is going to be the energy source for sperm motility. So what provides motility? Prostaglandins. But what provides the energy? What provides the energy for the motility is citrate coming from the prostate gland. And the enzymes, these enzymes specifically break down the semen clot once they are in the female reproductive tract. From there, it is implied that semen or sperm cells, there's a tendency for sperm cells to clot, which is not a good thing by the time that they reach the female reproductive tract. Let's make sure that's true. Doesn't We haven't found the answer to our inquiry. Okay. I think BYGU, this source is kind of useful, but it can only be so useful in answering the question completely. Oops. Okay. So, for the bulbourethral gland, or in other words, Cowper's gland, this is responsible for secreting viscous fluid that contains mucus. Mucus, this kind of mucus, is important for lubrication. So, if you don't want to memorize the word bulbourethral, you can just say Cowper's. They're essentially the same thing. So, yeah. What's the importance of lubrication in the male reproductive system? There. So that's a response. The secretion of alkaline mucus is a response to sexual stimulation. Okay. So for the human physiology or the functional anatomy of the female reproductive system, it is said that there are three characteristics. The first being cyclic changes in activity, menstrual cycle, um, and menstruation. So, yeah, aside from that, we have restricted periods of fertility. So, there is something called a fertility window. Uh, you, it is only during this time that you can be pregnant, and there is a time when you cannot be pregnant, even if you and your partner do the thing or do intercourse. And for the third characteristic, we have limited gamete production. Uh, so, yeah, the pool is established at birth. You only have, as a female, a set number of oogonia that you produce in your lifetime. So, it is popular, this idea is popular. A school of thought that says a woman is the most, the best age to be pregnant is um, anywhere between, say, 18 to 30. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but um, what I'm trying to say is 30 and beyond, there's a good chance that fertility may not be possible anymore. Uh, there is something called menopause. Uh, you get that somewhere in the middle age. Um, if you're if a woman is in her 50s or latter 40s, so during that time, it's most likely that the gamete production may come to a halt. But for guys, it's a different case. Uh, they can still um, impregnate uh, even in an old age. So uh, that's from my observation. Um, I just remember Robert De Niro. That's all. Uh, so this is the female reproductive system. So we have the vagina, the cervix, the uterus, the endometrium, which is a specific lining. This is important during menstruation. This is the lining where that's being shed during menstruation. So coming from there, blood is released. We have the myometrium. So when we mean by myo endo, um, the prefixes myo and endo, they're also used in the cardiovascular system. So particularly the heart, we have the myocardium and the endocardium. More on that later, probably. Pretty sure I do have a reviewer talking about that. Anyways, maybe, yeah, it's in a different reviewer. It's not really part of the coverage for the quiz at hand. But anyways, so ovaries, they have bilateral symmetry. Um, Actually, humans have bilateral symmetry, if I'm not wrong. There are many types of symmetry, but for phylum Chordata, or particularly humans, we have bilateral symmetry. For the rest, uh, they have either spherical or radial symmetry. But for bilateral, um, our shape is unique. Our back and our front, they're different. So yeah, similar to this fly right here. uh, if you consider what the mosquito sorry what the fly looks like at the front compared to what it looks like at the back, um, it's very different. Compare that to radial symmetry. So yeah, that's just one of the many details that you can use to distinguish the types of symmetries from one another. So uh, in each ovary we have these parts. You don't really have to know this if you're not going med school, but the follicles, uh, this contains developing or maturing ovum. So this is where oogenesis happens, if I'm not mistaken. So once the mature ovum is ready, it starts to leave the ovary and it travels into the uterine tube, or in other words, the fallopian tubes, which is, just like what I mentioned earlier, is the site of fertilization. So that's where the sperm and egg meet, here, the uterine tube. So, uh, regardless if the mature ovum is fertilized or not, it will travel to the uterus. So, yeah, given the chance that the woman does not get impregnated, the sperm does not reach the uterine tube, and no pregnancy happens, um, there's something that happens to the um, ovum that's not fertilized. If I'm not mistaken, either it becomes disintegrated from within or it gets released outside in a form of something. Um, one answer is correct between the two, I believe. So, if the developing or mature ovum becomes fertilized or it becomes a zygote, it will be implanted in the uterus wall. This is why in a woman, given that after 9 months, throughout the 9 months, the baby grows from here. So the uterus, in Filipino, I remember a doctor's calling this bahay bata. So from the word bahay means home and bata means child. So this is the home of the unborn child. So if the developing or mature ovum is not fertilized, just like what I said earlier, it continues to pass through the uterus, vagina, and out of the body. So yeah, I'm still not convinced. I'm still pretty sure that, well, the other answer is correct, not this. Um, just because a classmate of mine told me. I know I should rely on reliable sources, but yeah, I believe this is also right. So, the functions of granulosa cells, I won't even mention what granulosa cells are. The teacher never really taught this to us, but yeah, I just got this from another video. So, they secrete antral fluid. They provide nutrients for the developing oocyte. Uh, they secrete or produce paracrines, inhibin, estrogens, and substance that forms the zone pellucida or zone pellucide. This is gonna be important for later. I don't remember where that is, what context, but we'll get to that. So, uh, let's talk about the uterus. So this is the site of fetal development, and just like what I said earlier, it's the bahay bata, home of the unborn child. Cervix, this is the canal leading to the vagina, and for the cervix plus the vagina, these two organs amount to the birth canal. So yeah, for the walls of the uterus, we have three. The outer layer is called the perimetrium, middle is the myometrium, and the inner, where there is shedding during menstruation, it's called the endometrium. So endometrium is the innermost layer of the uterus. So for the outer layer or the perimetrium, It comprises of epithelial cells and connective tissue. Just to give you a background on what connective tissue is, it comprises of many things, but commonly bone and blood, and yeah, maybe blood vessels as well. I think that's also right. I mean, if it's other than the three tissues, other than connective, which are basically epithelial, nervous, and muscle tissue. I believe connective tissue, blood vessels fall under the category of connective tissue. So yeah, it is sensible to think that the perimetrium comprises of connective tissue. For the myometrium, we have smooth muscle, and it is the thickest layer. For the endometrium, which is the innermost, it is a layer of epithelial and connective tissue, and there are numerous glands. I'm just not sure what those glands are. Okay, so for the ovary, this is the female organ of copulation. I believe the male counterpart for this is the penis. So yeah, those two organs are involved in copulation. It contains smooth muscle, which is important for, in a way, delivering the baby after 9 months. So this comes in handy. It expands. The vagina is supposed to expand according to the size of uh, the head of the baby. And yeah, more than that soon. I think nursing school is more specific in that regard, in the concepts revolving to that idea. So the inner surface is bathed in acid fluid. Uh, so yes, it is natural to say that the vagina, as part of the female reproductive system, is acidic in nature. So this fluid is secreted from the uterus or the glands in the cervix. So yeah, what's the reason why the vagina is supposed to be acidic in nature? Well, this is to fend off bacteria. So yeah, I just mentioned the same things. Okay, this is the ovary, the fimbriae, and then the uterine tube. There are three names, just like what I said earlier today. The uterine tubes are also called as fallopian tubes, as well as oviducts. Either of those terms, whatever is mentioned, you know what it means. So what's fimbriae? Similar to cilia, which functions in I believe, the small intestine, for peristalsis, to help food move. I'm not sure what that's called, like what food is called at a point where it is located in the small intestine, being absorbed of its nutrients until waste products are what's left. I believe it's called chyme, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, fimbriae, finger-like projections, in just like how peristalsis occurs in or is applied in the male reproductive system, uh, peristalsis is also applied in the female reproductive system. It makes sense because in the digestive system, villi, they're involved in peristalsis, digestive peristalsis. So here, finger-like projections, they perform peristalsis. So what's the infundibulum? So this is located right above the fimbriae, somewhere here, and it is intended to help pick up ovum that's released from the ovary. So once the ovum is mature enough to leave the ovary, the infundibulum is the one that helps pick the ovum coming from the ovary. So from there, it travels through the uterine tube. So yeah, fimbriae and infundibulum, they both work together to help move the ovum out of the uterine tube through peristalsis. So yeah, it is stated that it takes 4 days for the mature ovum to reach the uterus. Okay, uh, now let's talk about spermatogenesis. So, first things first, sperm is considered a male gamete, and in other words, it's called spermatozoa. So, for the parts of a sperm, we have the head, the midpiece. Midpiece stores the mitochondria, which is important for the production of ATP, the energy that the sperm cell needs in order to swim towards the fallopian tubes, coming from the vagina all throughout, all the way to the fallopian tubes. So they come all the way to the fallopian tubes in millions, and only a few survive. So it's quite a perilous journey. And you, as a person, the sperm that was lucky enough to fertilize the egg, you're just a lucky person. I think that's what they usually say. It's kind of witty, but yeah. We have the tail or the flagellum, which is of course intended for the swimming ability, for motility. So, the head contains chromosomes. So, the autosomes we have 22, and the sex chromosomes we have 1. The sperm is a haploid. So, acrosome contains enzymes that are necessary for fertilization. Enzymes are proteins. So we have the midpiece, what I said earlier. It contains the mitochondria, which produces ATP. For the tail, it's in other words called the flagellum, and it is intended for the sperm motility to actually happen. Without the flagellum, without the tail, what will propel the sperm forward? Nothing. So yeah, spermatogenesis, this is the process of sperm production. So yeah, germ cells is equal to spermatogonia. It's diploid, and there are two types of compartments in the Sertoli cell. We have the basal and the luminal compartment. So as the sperm migrates toward the lumen, they undergo development. For spermatogonia, uh, males are born with a finite number. I believe this also goes with females. Females are born with a finite number of oogonia. Oogonia is the female counterpart of spermatogonia. So that's the first substance that's involved in the process. So it's diploid and it undergoes mitosis. So it continuously divides and it develops into what? Primary spermatocytes, which is diploid. So coming from there, the primary spermatophytes, they undergo meiosis 1. Meiosis 1, coming from there, it produces what's called secondary spermatocytes, which is considered haploid. And for the third process, these secondary spermatocytes, they undergo meiosis 2. Of course, in cell division, we have two parts of meiosis. We have 1 and 2. So it's natural to think that there is a meiosis 2 afterwards. And from there, the secondary spermatophytes, they become spermatids. So, what happens with the spermatids? They undergo maturation and development stage in order to become spermatozoa. So this is a chart, or say a flow chart, that summarizes everything that I just said. So, spermatogonia, which is diploid, in other words 2N, it undergoes mitosis to form primary spermatocytes, and then it undergoes meiosis 2 in order to form secondary spermatocytes. And through meiosis 2, it turns into spermatids, which eventually mature and develop to become spermatozoa. So spermatozoa is the final form. So all of this process was happening as the cells were migrating from basal compartment toward the luminal compartment. Remember what I said earlier? In the Sertoli cell, there are two types of compartments. So there is a transfer from the basal to the luminal. Now, Once the process is over, sperm are located in the lumen of the seminiferous tubule. So, again, germ cell is spermatogonia. Uh, so, yeah, this is actually a more important chart to understand. So, spermatogonia undergo mitosis, becomes primary, meiosis 1 becomes secondary, meiosis 2 becomes spermatids. And then they eventually become spermatozoa. Okay, I believe this is the same lumen as what's being described here, the lumen of the seminiferous tubule. So, in every ejaculation, just so you know, the amount of sperm released ranges between 50 to 500 million. Now, let's move to the females. Development of the ova. So, oogenesis, this is the development or production of the ova. Ova is the gamete for females, and it occurs in three different phases, oogenesis. So first is the fetal phase, the prior to ovulation phase, which is during puberty and after fertilization. So oogonia, which is diploid, it undergoes mitosis and differentiation. There's a reason why this one doesn't continue. Only one remains and it continues. So we have the primary oocyte, and meiotic arrest happens, and it undergoes meiosis 1. Prior to ovulation, this is again the second phase. Before it undergoes meiosis 1, actually, meiosis 1 already is supposed to start during the fetal phase. Meiosis 1 finishes during the second phase, which is prior to ovulation. And in that process, first polar body is produced and it eventually disintegrates for some reason. And we have eventually the secondary oocyte. Now, after fertilization, I believe meiosis 2 also starts in phase 2, and then by phase 3 it starts to finish. And the second polar body is produced, and what is the result is called the ovum. So, let's just recall what was mentioned. Fetal phase, oogonia is diploid. This is considered a germ cell in the female reproductive tract. If males have the spermatogonia, the females have the oogonia. And it undergoes mitosis. So, after mitosis, some oogonia undergo meiosis 1, and start at the second phase. Meiosis may begin and the primary oocyte is produced. So there's something called mitotic arrest. I don't know if the spelling is right. It says here meiotic arrest, but here it says mitotic. Anyways, the baby will have been born and it would reach puberty. So we have the prior to ovulation phase. This is at puberty. Meiosis 1 is completed here, as stated earlier, and one oocyte per month completes meiosis 1. Now, for the secondary oocyte, which is haploid, this is what leaves the ovary and enters into the uterine tube. Now, when secondary oocyte enters the uterine tube, two things can possibly happen. Either the woman gets pregnant, by which meiosis 2 would occur and production of ovum would happen. But yeah, if there is no fertilization, secondary oocyte will continue to pass through the rest of the uterine tube, through the uterus and out of the body. So basically, if the woman does not get pregnant, phase 3 will not happen. Or in other words, meiosis 2 will not happen. Regardless if the woman gets pregnant or not, meiosis 1 will happen. But yeah, meiosis 2 makes all the difference. Doesn't happen if the woman is not fertilized. So, Uh, Regarding ovulation and the menstrual cycle, so for the ovaries, these two ovaries, a woman only has two ovaries. So yeah, again, this is uh the birth canal, this is the uterus, the fallopian tubes over here. There are only two ovaries. So there are thousands of follicles containing an immature egg. Uh, so coming from these follicles, uh, ova arise, or ovums, ova, whatever is the plural for ovum. So preparing for ovulation. Uh, by the way, this part is going to be for uh, ovulation. So days 1 to 6, the FSH, or in other words, the follicle stimulating hormone, uh, it stimulates a large number of follicles. So upon this kind of stimulation, the immature egg inside begins to grow, mature, and produce estrogen. So these estrogens, they go into the bloodstream. They send signal to prepare the uterus for pregnancy. So this is when fertility window starts to open. This is how the body prepares. So the endometrium is covered in thick and spongy layer. It is known that same uh, this same part of the female reproductive system is where um, the shedding of lining is um, or occurs. So for number 7, the ovum produces a large amount of estrogen. The pituitary gland produces LH, or luteinizing hormone, in order to stimulate ovulation. So yeah. Uh, Day 14, the luteinizing hormones begins to act on the ovaries. The dominant egg matures rapidly, and it detaches eventually from the follicle. And during ovulation, the ovary releases an egg, or expulsion of the ovum. So fimbria, this is at the end of the uterine tube. This is a set of cells responsible for collecting the recently expelled egg. So if you remember earlier, fimbria, it's this one, the fimbriae. So together with the other guy, what do you call that? The infundibulum, they both help the mature ovum escape the ovary and find its way throughout the uterine tube. Well, mainly help the ovum get out of the ovary. So yeah. Back. So at the end of the uterine tube, this is a set of cells responsible for collecting the recently expelled egg, transports it to the entrance of the uterine tube. So, through muscular contractions or peristalsis, ovum is pushed towards the center by the uterus. In the uterus. So, during day 15, progesterone, another hormone aside from estrogen, is produced inside the ovary. This is important for the second phase uh, uh, of the menstrual cycle to occur. So, in abundance of progesterone, two things happen. The woman may be more active and productive, and vaginal discharge is released. So, another side effect of vaginal discharge is that the woman can experience sexual arousal. So, yeah. Towards the end of the cycle, progesterone levels decrease, and premenstrual syndrome occurs. The symptoms, we have mood swings, inflammation, pimples, colic pain, sensitivity in chest, and fluid retention. I do have to ask what colic is. Colic, females, menstruation. Menstrual cramp. fluctuating hormones. Yeah, it's painful, they say. So, for day 28, the menstrual cycle is completed and the body is about to menstruate, and we go back to day 1. Through menstrual cramps, the ovule and the layer in the endometrium are discarded in the form of menstruation. Makes sense. The ovule, uh, the unfertilized egg, and a layer in the endometrium, they're shedded. The shed layer and the ovule, they're removed from the body. Okay, so this is the menstrual cycle divided into 4 stages. We have menstruation, the shedding, we have the follicular phase. Actually, I believe we started not here. Menstruation was already the last part. But yeah, I don't think the labeling really matters that much. Follicular phase, as long as you know the characteristics. So the egg is over here, the fallopian tubes, that's ovulation. Luteal phase. I remember calculating what is the fertility window with respect to this illustration. It's just somewhere there. I just can't be sure right now. Even though I researched that, it still might be wrong for some reason. Anyways, so in fertilization, during sexual intercourse, 300 million sperm approximately enter the vagina. Millions flow out or die in the acidic environment. Again, to give you an idea of what sperm is, it's alkaline in nature. And in an acidic environment, although yes, the seminal vesicles are capable of secreting a fluid that keeps them protected as much as possible. Although mass death of sperm cells is inevitable, there's a good chance for the sperm to survive, the remaining sperm to survive throughout the entire journey. So, yeah, the unfortunate ones just die in the acidity, the extreme acidity of the environment. And many survive due to the protecting fluid, just like what I said. It's secreted by the seminal vesicles, very alkaline, helps them in motility through the provision of, what do you call that, prostaglandins. So yeah, they pass the cervix, which is supposed to be open, as it is during ovulation phase that the sex occurs. So yeah, the fertility window, whether it's open or not, it's also determined by whether the cervix is open or closed. And during the fertility window, in a time when you can be impregnated, the cervix is supposed to be open. And yeah, cervical mucus is thinned to a more watery consistency for easier passage. So cervical mucus, just like mucus that is produced by the, I believe, the Cowper's gland or the bulbourethral gland in the male reproductive system, the mucus generally is intended for lubrication. So yeah. Once inside the cervix, the sperm swims through the uterus, and the muscular uterine contractions help the sperm swim. Aside from the motility provided by the prostaglandins and the flagellum of a particular sperm cell, the uterine contractions are also a contributing factor to their to strengthening their ability to swim in such environment. So resident cells coming from the immune system, they mistake sperm for foreign invaders. So this is another way that reduces the amount of sperm that's able to reach the fallopian tubes. So yeah, I believe one of them is a white blood cell. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Please don't get my word for it. Uh, anyways, so the sperm heads to the fallopian tubes, and a few thousand remain. Cilia pushes the ovum to the uterus, and this cilia makes the sperm go against its current. So, I mentioned about zona pellucida earlier. It's actually, yeah, it's part of the egg cell itself. Well, the layers concerning it. So, corona radiata is the outer layer, and zona pellucida is, it's somehow a layer, but it's transparent. It is surrounding the plasma membrane. So this is where sperm attaches. But before that, let's talk about the corona radiata. So this is an outer layer of follicular cells around the developing oocyte. And the sperm was pushed through to enter. And in the zona pellucida, whatever sperm cell is able to go through first, that's what the egg cell is going to meet. And everyone else will die. All of the other sperm cells that did not make it to the first place will all disintegrate to kingdom come. Anyways, but yeah, fancy phrase, but it's true. Right after the sperm fertilizes the oocyte, um, the the egg itself is programmed to disintegrate all the other sperm cells. So the first sperm to make contact will fertilize the egg, and the outer membranes fuse. This is what happens, and the egg pulls the sperm inside. As a result, the egg releases chemicals that push the other sperm away from the egg. And yeah, as much as the other sperm cells intend to go through, it's no longer possible because of the impenetrable fertilization membrane that is produced. And so the zona pellucida hardens. What used to be transparent and easy to go through is now hardened. Now, inside the egg, provided that there is fertilization, the sperm cell fertilizes the egg. Tightly packed genetic material spreads out. So new membrane forms around the genetic material. Male pronucleus is created, and inside, genetic material reforms into 23 chromosomes. The number 23, so I believe this is where it makes sense. It is said that we have 46 chromosomes, 23 coming from dad, 23 coming from mom. So, yeah, female genetic material is awakened by sperm fusion with the egg, finishes dividing. So, yeah, we also have 23 chromosomes coming from the mother. So the two sets of chromosomes join together, which concludes the fertilization process, and a unique genetic code arises. Now, a new cell, which is called a zygote, it sweeps to the uterus after being fertilized at the fallopian tubes. Implantation in the rich uterine lining with growth. So there will be maturation for 9 months. Okay. Now, let's make a next video for the next ones. This is actually quite a lot. Yeah, I don't think I can cover everything in a single night. It's kind of tiring, but yeah. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Next video will be about the 9 months. A more detailed process of what happens within those 9 months of being pregnant.